The Republic of Zambia (Zambia) is a landlocked country in southern Africa, neighbouring the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the north, Tanzania to the northeast, Malawi to the east, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana and Namibia to the south, and Angola to the west. The capital city is Lusaka, in the south-central part of Zambia. The population is concentrated mainly around Lusaka in the south and the Copperbelt Province to the northwest, the core economic hubs of the country. Originally inhabited by Khoisan peoples, the region was affected by the Bantu expansion of the 13th century. After visits by European explorers in the 18th century, Zambia became the British protectorate of northern Rhodesia towards the end of the 19th century. For most of the colonial period, Zambia was governed by an administration appointed from London with the advice of the British South Africa Company. On the 24th of October 1964, Zambia became independent of the United Kingdom and Prime Minister Kenneth Kaunda became the inaugural president. Kaunda's Socialist United National Independence Party maintained power from 1964 until 1991. Kaunda played a key role in regional diplomacy, cooperating closely with the United States in search of solutions to conflicts in Rhodesia, Angola, and Namibia. From 1972 to 1991, Zambia was a one-party state with the UNIP as the sole legal political party under the motto, One Zambia, One Nation. Kaunda was succeeded by Frederick Chiluba of the Social Democratic Movement for Multi-Party Democracy in 1991, beginning a period of social-economic growth and government decentralization. Levi Mwanawasa, Chiluba's chosen successor, presided over Zambia from January 2002 until his death in August 2008, and is credited with campaigns to reduce corruption and increase the standard of living. After Mwanawasa's death, Rupiah Banda presided as acting president before being elected president in 2008. Holding office for only 3 years, Banda stepped down after his defeat in the 2011 elections by Patriotic Front Party leader Michael Sata. Sata died on the 28th of October 2014, the second Zambian president to die in office. Guy Scott served briefly as interim president until new elections were held on the 20th of January 2015, in which Edgar Lungu was elected as the sixth president. In 2010, the World Bank named Zambia one of the world's fastest economically reformed countries. The Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa is headquartered in Lusaka. Etymology: the territory of what is now Zambia was known as Northern Rhodesia from 1911. It was renamed Zambia at independence in 1964. The new name of Zambia was derived from the Zambezi River. History: prehistoric era. The area of modern Zambia is known to have been inhabited by the Khoisan until around AD 300, when migrating Bantu began to settle around these areas. These early hunter-gatherer groups were later either annihilated or absorbed by subsequent more organized Bantu groups. Archaeological excavation work on the Zambezi Valley and Kalambo Falls show a succession of human cultures. In particular, ancient camping site tools near the Kalambo Falls have been radiocarbon dated to more than 36,000 years ago. The fossil skull remains of Broken Hill Man, dated between 300,000 and 125,000 years BC, further shows that the area was inhabited by prehistoric man. Bantu empires. The early history of tribes of modern-day Zambia can only be gleaned from knowledge passed down by successive generations through word of mouth. In the 12th century, major waves of Bantu-speaking immigrants arrived during the Bantu expansion. Among them, the Tonga people were the first to settle in Zambia and are believed to have come from the east near the Big Sea. The Nkoya people also arrived early in the expansion, coming from the Lubalandi kingdoms located in the southern parts of the modern Democratic Republic of the Congo and northern Angola, followed by a much larger influx, especially between the late 12th and early 13th centuries. By the late 12th century, more advanced kingdoms and empires had been established in most regions of modern-day Zambia. To the east, the Malawi Empire, also spanning the vast areas of Malawi and parts of present-day northern Mozambique, began to flourish under Kalonga. At the end of the 18th century, some of the Mbunda migrated to Barrowsland, Mongu upon the migration of, among others, the Sayingal, the Aluyi and the leader, the Lutunga Mulamwa, especially valued the Mbunda for the fighting ability. In the early 19th century, the Nsokolo people settled in the Mbala district of Northern Province. During the 19th century, the Goni and Sotho peoples arrived from the south. By the late 19th century, most of the various peoples of Zambia were established in their current areas. European contact. The earliest European to visit the area was the Portuguese explorer Francisco de Lasada in the late 18th century. Lasada led an expedition from Mozambique to the Copperbelt region in Zambia, and died during the expedition in 1798. The expedition was from then on led by his friend Francisco Pinto. This territory, located between Portuguese Mozambique and Portuguese Angola, was claimed and explored by Portugal in that period. Other European visitors followed in the 19th century. The most prominent of these was David Livingstone, who had a vision of ending the slave trade through the three C's: Christianity, commerce and civilization. He was the first European to see the magnificent waterfalls on the Zambezi River in 1855, naming them the Victoria Falls after Queen Victoria. He described them thus: "Scenes so lovely must have been gazed upon by angels in the flight." Locally, the falls are known as Mosi Otunya, or Thundering Smoke, in the Lozi Kololo dialect. The town of Livingstone, near the falls, is named after him. Highly publicized accounts of his journeys motivated a wave of European visitors, missionaries and traders after his death in 1873. British South Africa Company in 1888. The British South Africa Company, led by Cecil Rhodes, obtained mineral rights from the Lutunga, the paramount chief of the Lozi, for the area which later became Barrowsland and northwestern Rhodesia. To the east, in December 1897, a group of the Angoni rebelled under Cinco, son of King Mpeteni, but the rebellion was put down, and Mpeteni accepted the Pax Britannica. That part of the country then came to be known as northeastern Rhodesia. In 1895, Rhodes asked his American scout Frederick Russell Burnham to look for minerals and ways to improve river navigation in the region, and it was during this trek that Burnham discovered major copper deposits along the Kafu River. Northeastern Rhodesia and Barrowsland, northwestern Rhodesia, were administered as separate units until 1911, when they were merged to form Northern Rhodesia, a British protectorate. In 1923, the BSA Company ceded control of Northern Rhodesia to the British government after the government decided not to renew the company's charter. British colonization. In 1923, Southern Rhodesia, a conquered territory which was also administered by the BSA Company, became a self-governing British colony. In 1924, after negotiations, administration of Northern Rhodesia transferred to the British Colonial Office. Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. In 1953, the creation of the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland grouped together Northern Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia and Nyasaland as a single semi-autonomous region. This was undertaken despite opposition from a sizable minority of the population, who demonstrated against it in 1960-61. Northern Rhodesia was the center of much of the turmoil and crisis characterizing the federation in its last years. Initially, Harry Nkumbula's African National Congress led the campaign, which Kenneth Kaunda's United National Independence Party subsequently took up. Independence, a two-stage election held in October and December 1962, resulted in an African majority in the Legislative Council and an uneasy coalition between the two African nationalist parties. The council passed resolutions calling for Northern Rhodesia's secession from the Federation and demanding full internal self-government under a new constitution and a new National Assembly based on a broader, more democratic franchise. The Federation was dissolved on the 31st of December 1963, and in January 1964, Kaunda won the only election for Prime Minister of Northern Rhodesia. The colonial governor, Sir Evelyn Hoant, was very close to Kaunda and urged him to stand for the post. Soon after, there was an uprising in the north of the country known as the Lumpa Uprising, led by Alice Lenshina, Kaunda's first internal conflict as leader of the nation. Northern Rhodesia became the Republic of Zambia on the 24th of October 1964, with Kenneth Kaunda as the first president. At independence, despite its considerable mineral wealth, Zambia faced major challenges. Domestically, there were few trained and educated Zambians capable of running the government, and the economy was largely dependent on foreign expertise. This expertise was provided in part by John Wilson CMG. There were over 70,000 Europeans resident in Zambia in 1964, and they remained of disproportionate economic significance. Kaunda's endorsement of Patriotic Front guerrillas conducting raids into neighbouring Rhodesia resulted in political tension and a militarization of the border, leading to its closure in 1973. The Kariba hydroelectric station on the Zambezi River provided sufficient capacity to satisfy the country's requirements for electricity. Despite Rhodesian management, a railway to the Tanzanian port of Dar es Salaam, completed in 1975 with Chinese assistance, reduced Zambian dependence on railway lines south to South Africa and west through an increasingly troubled Portuguese Angola. Until the completion of the railway, Zambia's major artery for imports and the critical export of copper was along the Tanzam Road, running from Zambia to the port cities in Tanzania. The Tazama oil pipeline was also built from Dar es Salaam to Ndola in Zambia. By the late 1970s, Mozambique and Angola had attained independence from Portugal. Rhodesia's predominantly white government, which issued a unilateral declaration of independence in 1965, accepted majority rule under the Lancaster House Agreement in 1979. Civil strife in both Portuguese colonies and a mounting Namibian War of Independence resulted in an influx of refugees and compounded transportation issues. The Benguela Railway, which extended west through Angola, was essentially closed to Zambian traffic by the late 1970s. Zambia's support for anti-apartheid movements such as the African National Congress also created security problems as the South African Defence Force struck at dissident targets during external raids. Economic troubles. In the mid-1970s, the price of copper, Zambia's principal export, suffered a severe decline worldwide. In Zambia's situation, the cost of transporting the copper great distances to market was an additional strain. Zambia turned to foreign and international lenders for relief, but, as copper prices remained depressed, it became increasingly difficult to service its growing debt. By the mid-1990s, despite limited debt relief, Zambia's per capita foreign debt remained among the highest in the world. Democratization. In June 1990, riots against Kaunda accelerated. Many protesters were killed by the regime in breakthrough June 1990 protests. In 1990 Kanda survived an attempted coup, and in 1991 he agreed to reinstate multi-party democracy, having instituted one-party rule under the Choma Commission of 1972. Following multi-party elections, Kanda was removed from office. In the 2000s, the economy stabilized, attaining single-digit inflation in 2006-2007, real GDP growth, decreasing interest rates, and increasing levels of trade. Much of its growth is due to foreign investment in mining and to higher world copper prices. All this led to Zambia being courted enthusiastically by donors, and saw a surge in investor confidence in the country. Politics in Zambia take place in a framework of a presidential representative democratic republic, whereby the President of Zambia is both head of state and head of government in a pluriform multi-party system. The government exercises executive power, while legislative power is vested in both the government and parliament. Zambia became a republic immediately upon attaining independence in October 1964. From 2011 to 2014, Zambia's president had been Michael Sata, until Sata died on 28 October 2014. After Sata's death, Vice President Guy Scott, a Zambian of Scottish descent, became acting president of Zambia. On 24 January 2015 it was announced that Edgar Chagwa Lungu had won the election to become the sixth president in a tightly contested race. He won 48.33% of the vote, a lead of 1.66% over his closest rival, Hakainde Hichilema, with 46.67%. 9 other candidates all got less than 1% each. Foreign relations. After independence in 1964, the foreign relations of Zambia were mostly focused on supporting liberation movements in other countries in southern Africa, such as the African National Congress and SWAPO. During the Cold War, Zambia was a member of the Non-Aligned Movement. Military. The Zambian Defense Force consists of the Zambia Army, the Zambia Air Force, and the Zambian National Service. The ZDF is designed primarily against external threats. Administrative divisions. Zambia is divided into 10 regions, which are further divided into 105 districts, 150 constituencies, and 1,430 wards. Provinces. Central, Copperbelt; Eastern, Luapula, Lusaka, Muchinga; Northwestern, Northern, Southern, Western. Geography. Zambia is a landlocked country in southern Africa, with a tropical climate, and consists mostly of high plateaus with some hills and mountains, dissected by river valleys. At 752,614 square kilometers, it is the 39th largest country in the world, slightly smaller than Chile. The country lies mostly between latitudes 8 degrees and 18 degrees south, and longitudes 22 degrees and 34 degrees east. Zambia is drained by 2 major river basins: the Zambezi-Kafu Basin in the center, west and south, covering about 3/4 of the country, and the Congo Basin in the north, covering about 1/4 of the country. A very small area in the northeast forms part of the internal drainage basin of Lake Rukwa in Tanzania. In the Zambezi Basin, there are a number of major rivers flowing wholly or partially through Zambia: the Kabompo, Lungwebungu, Kafu, Luangwa, and the Zambezi itself, which flows through the country in the west and then forms its southern border with Namibia, Botswana and Zimbabwe. Its source is in Zambia. Zambia, but it diverts into Angola, and a number of its tributaries rise in Angola's central highlands. The edge of the Congo River floodplain forms Zambia's southwestern border, and via the Chobe River the river contributes very little water to the Zambezi because most is lost by evaporation. Two of the Zambezi's longest and largest tributaries, the Kafu and the Luangwa, flow mainly in Zambia. Their confluences with the Zambezi are on the border with Zimbabwe at Chirandu and Luangwa town respectively. Before its confluence, the Luangwa River forms part of Zambia's border with Mozambique. From Luangwa town, the Zambezi leaves Zambia and flows into Mozambique, and eventually into the Mozambique Channel. The Zambezi falls about 100 meters over the 1.6 kilometers wide Victoria Falls, located in the southwest corner of the country, subsequently flowing into Lake Kariba. The Zambezi Valley, running along the southern border, is both deep and wide. From Lake Kariba going east it is formed by grabens and like the Luangwa Mweru Luapila Mweru and Lake Tanganyika Vallis, is a rift valley. The north of Zambia is very flat with broad plains. In the west, the most notable being the Barrows floodplain on the Zambezi, which floods from December to June, lagging behind the annual rainy season. The flood dominates the natural environment and the lives, society and culture of the inhabitants and those of other smaller floodplains throughout the country. In eastern Zambia, the plateau which extends between the Zambezi and Lake Tanganyika valleys is tilted upwards to the north, and so rises imperceptibly from about 900 meters in the south to 1,200 meters in the center, reaching 1,800 meters in the north near Mbala. These plateau areas of northern Zambia have been categorized by the World Wildlife Fund as a large section of the central Zambezian Miombo woodlands ecoregion. Eastern Zambia shows great diversity. The Luangwa Valley splits the plateau in a curve northeast to southwest, extended west into the heart of the plateau by the deep valley of the Lunsumfwa River. Hills and mountains are found by the side of some sections of the valley, notably in its northeast the Nyika Plateau on the Malawi border, which extend into Zambia as the Mafinga Hills, containing the country's highest point, Mafinga Central. The Mujinga Mountains, the watershed between the Zambezi and Congo drainage basins, run parallel to the deep valley of the Luangwa River and form a sharp backdrop to its northern edge. Although they are almost everywhere below 1,700 meters, their culminating peak Mumpus at the western end and at 1,892 meters is the highest point in Zambia away from the eastern border region. The border of the Congo pedicle was drawn around this mountain. The southernmost head stream of the Congo River rises in Zambia and flows west through its northern area, firstly as the Ćămbișe and then, after the Banyulu swamps, as the Luapila, which forms part of the border with the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Luapila flows south then west before it turns north until it enters Lake Mweru. The lake's other major tributary is the Kalangwishi River, which flows into it from the east. The Luvua River drains Lake Mweru, flowing out of the northern end to the Lualaba River. Lake Tanganyika is the other major hydrographic feature that belongs to the Congo Basin. Its southeastern end receives water from the Kalambo River, which forms part of Zambia's border with Tanzania. This river has Africa's second highest uninterrupted waterfall, the Kalambo Falls. Climate: Zambia is located on the plateau of Central Africa, between 1,000 to 1,600 meters above sea level. The average altitude of 1,200 meters generally has a moderate climate. The climate of Zambia is tropical, modified by elevation. In the Köppen climate classification, most of the country is classified as humid subtropical or tropical wet and dry, with small stretches of semi-arid steppe climate in the southwest and along the Zambezi Valley. There are two main seasons, the rainy season corresponding to summer and the dry season corresponding to winter. The dry season is subdivided into the cool dry season and the hot dry season. The modifying influence of altitude gives the country pleasant subtropical weather rather than tropical conditions during the cool season of May to August. However, average monthly temperatures remain above 20 degrees Celsius over most of the country for 8 or more months of the year. Biodiversity: there are 14 ecosystems in Zambia, classed into forest, thicket, woodland and grassland vegetation types. Zambia is endowed with approximately 12,505 species, 63% animal species, 33% plant species and 4% bacterial and microorganism species. There are an estimated 3,543 species of wild flowering plants, consisting of sedges, herbaceous plants and woody plants. The northern and northwestern parts of the country especially have the highest diversity of flowering plants. Approximately 53% of flowering plants are rare and occur throughout the country. A total of 242 mammalian species exist, with most endemic ones occupying the woodland and grassland ecosystems. The Rhodesian giraffe and Kafue lechwe are some of the well-known species that are endemic to Zambia. An estimated 757 bird species are known to exist, of which 600 are either resident or Afrotropic migrants. 470 breed in the country, and 100 are non-breeding migrants. The Zambian barbet is a well-known species endemic to Zambia. Roughly 490 known fish species belonging to 24 fish families have been reported in Zambia, with Lake Tanganyika having the highest diverse and endemic species.